The laity will have voting rights at October's Synod on Synodality. Is that proper at a Synod of Bishops? Bishop Athanasius Schneider of Kazakhstan is challenging the idea. And the U.S. bishops hold their spring meeting in Orlando this week as Pope Francis recovers from abdominal surgery. The papal posse, Robert Royal and Father Gerald Murray, are here with analysis of these stories and more. And a Louisiana farmer is being attacked for celebrating his Catholic faith on social media and questioning Pride Month. Ross McKnight is here to tell his story. The World Over begins right now.
Now, Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. If you'd like to comment on tonight's show, send me a tweet. I'm at Raymond Arroyo. Let's get to it. He is the auxiliary bishop of Astana, Kazakhstan, and he's well known for his defense of traditional church teaching. He recently appealed to the Pope over the Pope's decision to allow the laity voting rights at a Synod of Bishops. Joining me now, Bishop Athanasius Schneider. Your Excellency, thank you for being here. You recently gave an interview in Rome to journalist Diane Montagna in which you asked Pope Francis to rescind these new norms which give equal voting rights to bishops and laity at the October Synod of Bishops. Why are you so concerned about this? I mean, isn't this synod about listening to the people?
It is simply against the hierarchical structure of the Church. Such equal voting rights of laity and the hierarchy is confusing. It's putting the laity on the same level, at least during the voting system. It had never happened in the history of the Church. This is a typical Protestant invention by Martin Luther and the other reformers who gave the same rights and abolished the distinction, the hierarchical distinction between the hierarchy, the ministerial priesthood, the shepherds of the church, and the laity, the flock. And therefore, these rights, voting rights, are undermining very clearly the divine structure of the church. And therefore, it is the duty of, I would say, every bishop to raise his voice, especially of the cardinals, and to ask the Pope to rescind these.
Your Excellency, you have referred to this decision as a radical novelty. Why do you think the decision was made? What's at play here?
Yes, it is evidently because this is a Protestant method. I repeat, as I say, it introduced Martin Luther and the other Protestants such synodal meetings with equal voting rights. And therefore, it is evident those who introduce now in the upcoming October Synod the same method as the Protestants did in the Reformation. It is evidently to Protestantize the Catholic Church evermore.
These new norms were announced in April by Synod Secretary General Cardinal Mario Grech and the General Rapporteur, Cardinal Jean-Claude Hollerich. Also part of this is the decision to prioritize women and young people among the laity, which makes up about 25% of the vote at the Synod. Doesn't this undermine the much advertised Synod of Bishops? And how radical a departure is this, these new norms, from the way synods have been practiced in the past?
This method is clearly a worldly style of this world, not of the Church of God, because we can consult lay people, but depending on their quality, on their proven faith, on their proven knowledge, then we can ask their advice, but not giving them voting rights. It's against the divine structure of the Church. I repeat, we can, and when there are, and there are, good qualified lay people, even women, and maybe younger people who have some qualities in the spiritual life, but it has to be proven, not simply to take this worldly method to take in a percentage of women and young people. This is not according to the Catholic tradition at all. I repeat, this is a worldly parliament style.
You talk in interviews I've recently read about Pope Paul VI's vision of a synod. How will the October synod differ from the late Pope's thoughts on the synod and whatever synodality is?
It's very much differing because Pope Paul VI, I quoted in my interview with Diane Montagna, his statements on the Synod of Bishops from 71. It was the second meeting, and he instituted these bishops of the Synod of Bishops, Paul VI, and in 71 he warned and reminded the bishops to do their task as teachers of the flock. So this is a difference. So they had to teach the lay people clearly. He reminded, and then he reminded them they had to teach clarity, not ambiguity, and said the church has to transmit the integrity of the tradition of the apostles and of the immutable faith of the Catholic Church. And then he added this important phrase, the church is in this point always strongly conservative, traditional, and because of this, that the church is faithful to tradition, she will never get old. She will be young.
Your Excellency, when you say you'd like these norms rescinded, exactly what are you asking Pope Francis to do? And what about the College of Cardinals? Do they have the power to act to return this synod to a Synod of Bishops?
Well, I ask clearly to rescind this norm of the Secretariat of the Synod of Bishops, who grant the equal voting rights to lay people together with the bishops. This is my formulation, and this is the very necessary that the Pope will rescind these. And the College of Cardinals, of course, they have no power over the Pope, because we are a monarchical structure of the church, not a conciliar, and therefore the cardinals, they are the closest advisors of the Pope, the College of Cardinals. This is their task. They have to respectfully remind the Pope to abolish these norms because it is undermining seriously the divine structure of the
Bishop, are other bishops joining you in this? I mean, have they added their voice to your plea? And I mean, we know where this is headed. You adjust who can vote, and then you selectively choose the people who can vote, and then the agenda is practically all sewn up. So are other bishops concerned, as you are, about the norms and the way that this is proceeding?
Yes, there are bishops who are concerned, but until now, I have not known that they raise publicly their voices and their concerns. Therefore, I think that the cardinals who have more authority in the church, more responsibility, they have to raise their voice respectfully and remind the Pope of his duty to maintain clarity in the structure of the church. And because the church exists to resolve the doubts in doctrine and moral, and not to create and to raise new doubt.
We will leave it there. Bishop Athanasius Schneider, thank you for being here. His new book, The Catholic Mass, Steps to Restore the Centrality of God in the Liturgy, by Bishop Schneider, is available everywhere. online and at bookstores. Thank you, Your Excellency.
You're welcome.
Here with reaction to Bishop Schneider's request, the USCCB spring meeting and much more is the Papal Posse. Editor-in-Chief of theCatholicThing.org, Robert Royal, joins me on set, and canon lawyer and priest of the Archdiocese of New York, Father Gerald Murray. Thank you both for being here. I want to begin with what we just heard from Bishop Schneider. Should Pope Francis rescind these norms, allowing laity to vote in a Synod of Bishops? Father Jerry, you first. What authority does this have? The Synod itself?
Well, the Synod ceases to be a Synod of Bishops once other people are allowed in there as equal voting members. It's logical. You know, if the Senate of the United States had a meeting and then invited 25 citizens to come in and gave them votes, they wouldn't become senators, but they would vitiate the senatorial voting procedure. It's clear as logic. And theologically, he's absolutely right. The shepherds of the church gather in order to advise the Pope, come to a consensus, vote on propositions, and then send those to the Pope. It doesn't involve having other people come in. If you want to have consultation with the laity, that's fine, but do it apart from the actual Synod of Bishops, which really ceases to exist once this comes into effect.
Bob, your thoughts?
Yeah, I was taken by what Bishop Schneider said about this not being, part of the ecclesial structure, because it seems to me that he's absolutely right, that this is more political than it is ecclesial or spiritual, if you want to put it in those terms. Because why do we have these special categories, young people, women, the margin? This is the language of politics. This is not the language of the church. Now, do we want to hear from those people? Sure, we want to hear from them. But should they be involved in this sort of direct consultation that then makes recommendations to the Pope? I don't really see that. And it tells you something that people like Cardinal Grech keep saying, well, this doesn't alter the basic nature that this is a Synod of Bishops, but then on the other hand, they want to claim that this is some sort of major step forward in terms of consultation. I think it's confused, but I think it's also nakedly political and therefore something to be worried about.
Yeah. We've seen the disastrous results of that German synod. And Father Jerry, earlier this year, the Church of England convened a synod comprised of bishops and clergy and lay people. The results? The synod voted to permit Anglican priests to bless same-sex weddings and civil partnerships, despite the fact that gay and lesbian weddings are prohibited in that church. Oh, and they're also considering banishing references to God as he, him, or father, the things Jesus said. They will consider gender neutral or female or alternatives. Father Jerry, is this where the Catholic Church is headed? Very quickly.
I hope not. I mean, we certainly should not follow that incoherence. In the Anglican Church, which they themselves recognize, they say contradictory things all the time and treat it as a way to satisfy different interest groups. The mission of the Catholic Church from Jesus Christ is to teach the truth. The truth does not change over time. Over time, we get to know it better, and the truth, when it's challenged, needs to be defended. So if the Synod and Bishops becomes a political, expression of, the Church, of what's happening now, we have a big problem.
Bob, you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was struck. I read the statement that the Anglicans put out, and there is a large group of bishops in the developing world, in Africa and Asia, who have just said now that the Archbishop of Canterbury is no longer the primate of all of them, because he is derogated from what the gospel is. And they actually used a very interesting phrase in the document that they sent. They said, we've been asked to walk together with these members of the Anglican Church who want to bless gay unions, and we can't walk together when we have divergent views of what the gospel itself actually says. I mean, this is a phrase that, of course, we have been hearing a lot being used also in terms of the Synod.
The Synod, yeah.
If you're walking in opposite directions, you're not walking together.
Yeah, well, the walking is an interesting transition. You almost read my mind, Bob. Bishop Daniel Flores of Brownsville is on the steering committee of the Synod. He's the only American represented on the executive committee. He said at the Bishops' Conference today that they are releasing the working text of the Synod next Tuesday. Now, clearly, some of the bishops are worried about this process. Listen to his explanation of the way the Synod is proceeding.
If it has felt at times that we were creating a pathway as we walked it, it's because we were. And this is largely due to the fact that some things you just have to start doing in order to learn how it can be done and how it can be done better. It seems to me, this is just my own thought, it seems to me that the Holy Father prefers this manner of proceeding.
Father Jerry, your reaction?
Let's see what that document says next week, but Bishop Flores' meaning is not quite clear. You have to do something before you know what you're doing or know how to do it. Does that mean an innovation against something in the existing doctrine of the faith, that we have to put it forward? I know that's precisely what the German Synod has done. The German Synodal way has been a disaster because it basically repudiates Catholic teaching in a number of areas. And then when you tell people, when you say to them, what you're doing is horrible, they say, no, we're simply ahead of the curve. We're leading the way. So if we're going in the wrong direction, it doesn't matter that we're walking. We're distancing ourselves from Christ and his truth.
Bob, very quickly, it has the whiff of Nancy Pelosi about it. We have to pass the bill to see what's in it. I mean, we have to go down the synodal way to see where we're going.
Yeah, you know, some people have been complaining that our bishops haven't spent more time talking about the Synod during this meeting this week. And they've even called it the most consequential event in the Church since Vatican II. Well, if I read through, and if anybody is looking for some penance to do in the next few days, you can read through the Continental report, the 40 pages, that could have been 5 pages actually if it had been written better. The 40 pages that was submitted to the Vatican, and even in there, we have bishops saying, well, we don't know what this is, but we're going through the process, and there can be enthusiasm about discovering something that you're not even sure what it is you're discovering. Yeah. So I think they're forced back to language like this because there is no clear goal in mind here.
Yeah. I want to change topics for a moment. Pope Francis has sent a letter to the attendees of the Outreach LGBTQ Catholic Ministry Conference being held at Fordham University in New York this weekend. In a letter sent to Father James Martin, the editor of Outreach, he suggests that Father Martin has the style of God, Bob, and he has encouraged him in this culture of encounter. Why the focus, do you think, by Pope Francis on this organization?
Well, it's a little bit frustrating because on the one hand, the Holy Father has talked about the kind of colonization of the world by this gender theory, this gender ideology that exists out there. But I think here there was the Jesuit connection, because I don't know why the Holy Father has taken such a shine to Father Martin. Father Martin is, of course, very deft at not appearing to contradict Catholic teaching, but actually, I think, doing so. And if you look at the list of speakers at this conference, this is mostly going to be devoted not just to outreach in the sense of being welcoming, but in changing doctrine. And the way the Holy Father, for example, praised Sister Janine Gramick not that long ago, who has been one of the founders of New Ways Ministries, which is a very, very radical group that has been condemned multiple times over decades. It just seems to me that the Vatican has this sort of Jesuit pipeline between Rome and New York that maybe accounts for his soft spot toward Father Martin, but that's the only explanation I have.
Father Jerry, the Pope has also met with Father Martin twice in private audiences. Your thoughts about why the embrace of this group? I mean, this has been going on for 3 years now. There was a book, there was a documentary.
Well, it seems that the Pope thinks that Father Martin is promoting the good of the Church by endorsing the homosexual lifestyle. And I think the Pope, if that's what he thinks, he's made a big mistake. If he's ill-informed about what outreach and its conferences are doing, someone should help him with the homework, because it's quite clear. Outreach, the website, and now this movement, it's about changing church teaching. They want to have the acceptability of the homosexual lifestyle. They no longer want homosexual attraction to be treated as something perverse or wrong. They don't believe sodomy is a mortal sin. They certainly endorse gay blessings at so-called same-sex marriages. Father Martin also endorses the existence of categories of human beings that the Church doesn't consider to be categories. Bisexuals, transsexuals or transgendered, people who are intersex or non-binary. All of this make-believe world, which is basically endorsing sexual liberation, that's really enslavement to sin, Father Martin's all in favor of that. And it's really, really terrible for your average Catholic to hear that Father Martin's getting all the attention. Meanwhile, Courage, which is the organization founded by Father John Harvey and Father Benedict Rochelle, which helps people with homosexual temptation who want to live chaste and good lives, Courage gets no encouragement from the Holy Father. It's very, very disappointing. And as regards the teaching of the Church, it's really a shame when people who attack that teaching, Father Martin has said he wants the catechism changed, people who attack the teaching get favored. People who defend it get ignored. This is what's happening right now.
I want to move on to Saturday. A conference was held, a meeting at the Vatican on human fraternity. This was at St. Peter's Square. A declaration on human fraternity was written for the event and issued by the Vatican. The declaration calls on all men and women of goodwill to embrace the appeal for fraternity. And it states, quote, "United with Pope Francis, we want to reaffirm that authentic reconciliation does not flee from conflict, but is achieved in conflict, resolving it through open dialogue and open, honest, and patient negotiation. All this within the context of the human rights framework. Our children, our future, can only thrive in a world of peace, justice, and equality to the benefit of the single human family. Only fraternity can generate humanity." Bob, God is not mentioned once in that document. What do you make of the statement that, quote, "only fraternity can generate humanity"? This thing sounds like it was created by an AI, you know, a chatbot or something.
Yes, this is one of the childs of John Lennon's Imagine. Imagine there are no countries, imagine there's no cause for conflict with people, or, that all conflict can somehow be resolved through dialogue. Yeah. This is simply not the experience of the human race throughout history. Even I think even religious traditions that don't believe in the fall, as we do, which means a radical departure from God and from the order that God intended for creation, and can only be repaired by God, and not just some generic God, but by Jesus Christ himself. So, by entering into this, which, by the way, was ignored by most of the secular media and largely the people even in Rome who were expected to show up, by ignoring that, you're proposing a solution that can never be a solution in Catholic understanding of what's there. Only Christ can reverse that division that exists not only between us and God, but between one another. Yeah. So it's focused on a solution that is a non-solution.
Yeah, it was a weird event, Father. I mean, the World Meeting on Humanity, or Human Fraternity, rather. It was held at St. Peter's Square. It's simulcast on several continents. It featured performances, including a shirtless ballet dancer who was sort of trotting around. There you see him glissading around in front of the St. Peter's. Then a woman got up and sang "Somewhere Over the Rainbow" on the steps of St. Peter. Father, I guess the village people weren't available. What is going on here? What is the purpose of this thing?
Well, the purpose, I guess, is to celebrate human achievement, but, let's note a couple of things. Singing "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," that happened to be the weekend in which gay pride celebrations were going on in Italy, and they've appropriated the rainbow as a symbol of their group and their ideology. The gentleman who did the dancing without a shirt on, according to reports, he's civilly married to a man. This is outrageous. The Vatican should not be a stage for promoting spectacles associated with immorality and associated, with an ideological cause that contradicts Christianity. Self-worship degenerates basically into the endorsement of the immoral behavior of fallen man, and that's where we're going in the world. Christ, as Bob was saying, he's the solution. He's called the Prince of Peace, precisely because when we acknowledge him, then peace returns to our lives.
I want to return to the USCCB meeting this week in Orlando. The bishops are considering and voting on a revision of the ethical and religious directives for Catholic healthcare services. This covers the relationship between Catholic medical professionals and the patients. Now, reports indicate the revision would update the directives to align with a doctrinal note the bishops issued back in March. It states Catholic healthcare services must not perform interventions, whether surgical or chemical, that aim to transform the sexual characteristics of a human body into those of the opposite sex or take part in the development of such procedures. Father Jerry, this revised update would essentially prohibit Catholic hospitals from performing transgender surgeries. But meanwhile, it's being reported a Catholic hospital, at least one, St. Francis Memorial Hospital in San Francisco, affiliated with the largest healthcare system in the U.S., Common Spirit Health, has received millions of dollars for a robot that assists with transgender sex change operations. Your thought?
Well, the bishops are right, and that hospital is doing something disgraceful. So-called sex change surgery or chemical invasion of the body cannot do the impossible. A man cannot turn into a woman cannot turn into a man. Doing bodily mutilation and pretending and suppressing natural hormones, this is very unhealthy. This is wrong. Catholics should have nothing to do with it. Part of the glory of the Catholic Church in the United States was the creation of a healthcare system to take care of poor immigrants who didn't have access to good health care. That system should remain faithful to the purpose for which it was founded. So I'm glad the bishops have spoken, but when it's being ignored, well, there's got to be consequences, because otherwise people get the impression, well, the bishops say something, but they really don't mean to enforce it. This better be enforced, and very fast, because this is a big problem in our society.
Bob, there's a lot of tension right now between medical cooperatives and unions and associations which accredit many of these doctors, and these doctors living out their Catholic faith and their deeply held convictions. The bishops are trying to thread the needle. Will they be able to?
Yeah, that's a good question, but I agree with Father entirely that there needs to be an enforcement mechanism here. Otherwise, it's just talk, and we have probably...
Which would look like what?
I don't know. I mean, look, I never get tired of saying we are a binary faith. Male and female, he created them. Father James Martin has raised the question of whether Genesis is right about that, but I'll stick with Genesis and with the tradition of the Church, and not with what he's trying to push or what other people are trying to push right now. But look, we live in a country that believes in religious liberty, that believes in pluralism. We have a right, and mostly our Supreme Court, when these cases get up to the Supreme Court, has sided with the ability of institutions to have definitions of who can work for them and what kind of conscience protections that they have. We're going to probably have to see a lot of development of the law in that regard. But unless the Catholics themselves push it, and push it rather vigorously in public, I don't think anything will happen. And it's got to start with the bishops, because they're the largest institutional body.
I've got to get to this. The USCCB has posted a graphic this week on their website stating, quote, "We call on Catholics to pray the Litany of the Sacred Heart on June 16th, offering this prayer as an act of reparation for the blasphemies against our Lord we see in our culture today." Now, Bob, this graphic comes following the Dodgers' decision to honor a group of anti-Catholic drag queens at their stadium on Friday. A prayerful protest against the Dodgers' decision, led by Bishop Strickland, is going to take place on Friday. But so far, we have not seen many bishops publicly protest the Dodgers. What do you make of this USCCB response? It's a bit vague.
Yeah, look, I can understand why they don't want to, as a body, look like they're encouraging some sort of special penalty against the Dodgers. But I've got to say, my heart is with the people who are going to show up there tomorrow in the midst of that. This is an absolute outrage. We live in a pluralistic society. At this point in our national history, if people are going to be gay in their private lives, there's not a lot we can do about it, because they have a right to do this. And I suppose that means that a private organization like the Dodgers can celebrate pride, although I think they would be wiser to just stay out of the subject entirely. But to pick the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, who are directly disrespectful. I mean, you can only call this stuff blasphemy and utter rejection. You want to talk about haters. These people are haters, and it isn't hard to find videos, statements by them that prove this. I think that this is an outrage, and it can only be stopped. I think prayer is great, but you know, there was a famous football coach who once said, prayers work better when the linemen are big. And so I think some physical presence will make a difference.
Yeah, no violence, but a presence is important, and I think a prayerful witness is so important. Father Jerry, I've been commenting on this over the last couple of weeks, and people have made the argument, look, the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, they serve their community. They've been serving there for 40 years. And I say, wait a minute, if the Dodgers want to salute a group of nuns who've been serving the community for real in San Francisco, 26 years ago, Mother Teresa's order opened up a home. You know what they do? They care for homeless HIV-infected men who are otherwise thrown in the street. They've been doing that for 26 years. I don't see the Dodgers bringing the Sisters of Charity center stage, the missionaries of charity, and saluting and clapping for them. This is really an outrage toward Catholicism. And your reaction?
Yeah, well, the Dodgers recognized that because after the first protest came up, they withdrew the invitation. But then they caved in when the homosexual groups basically said, if they don't go, we don't go. Well, he should have said, fine, we're not going to include bigotry in Dodger baseball. And, let's face it, anti-Catholic prejudice expressed, by this group and others is now treated as mainstream Americana by the Dodgers and by many people. And, I can't imagine an anti-Muslim or anti-Jewish group that did spectacles and paraded around in mockery that they would ever have a role to play in any Dodger community interest event. So the Dodgers made a big mistake. The Dodgers were owned by Walter O'Malley, who came from Brooklyn, New York, and he was a Catholic. He was very devoted. The O'Malley family, I'm sure, was very unhappy about all this. God bless Bill Donahue and the Catholic League because they've been leading the way on this. We should never say, well, let people do what they want. We want people to do good things, and when they do horrendous and objectionable things, the good thing we can do is say, stop it. This is wrong.
Well, I think Bob was right. If private corporations want to celebrate a group of people important to their product, have at it. Go at it all you want. But for a baseball team that was created really from the likes of Tommy Lasorda and Vince Scully, all Catholics, by the way, it kind of smacks against the tradition of the organization, and I dare say of the people who populate the stands. You can advocate whatever you want, and as Bob said, private organizations have that freedom, but the consumer has the freedom to push back and say, that's not why we patronize your game, that's not why we buy your product. And there does seem, Bob, to be a trend of pushback that we've not seen before. Yeah, why do you think that's happening?
I actually think there has been a bit of a sea change, and I'm noticing this in sort of moderate liberal publications and broadcasts and whatnot. I think there's a recognition that particularly this trans thing has gone too far, that you've got now parents coming forward and saying, you're mutilating our children, basically. You're proselytizing them in school when we can't read the Bible. Muslims can't proselytize, Jews can't. But somehow the LGBT juggernaut is able to show films and require people to participate in events that are related with pride. There was this incident up in Canada last week where a teacher actually told a Muslim student who wouldn't show up for these events, you don't belong here in Canada. Well, all of a sudden, the 99% of the people throughout history who believed a different thing than this small group of people now believes don't belong in our democracies. And Father is right to say this has become sort of the standard orthodoxy in our public life. We have to push back very hard at this, and I'm starting to see this crack on the trans issues, and we may see even yet other things. We're seeing students certainly standing up and mocking when they're being shown films of, yet another gay pride film.
Well, you see, the polls are also, Father, shifting, and people are very concerned about this. And look, I think Americans, by and large, are fair people. They want people to be free. They want people to do what they wish to do with their lives and their bodies. However, when that begins to impinge upon your child's rights and your child's body, and when it runs up against religious belief, and that's really what we're talking about here, the right for a group to not only defame a religion, but to publicly be honored for doing so. And I think, to pick up on what you said earlier, if this were the, raging drag queen rabbis or the imaginary imams running around in that garb, they shouldn't be tolerated and they wouldn't be tolerated. The Dodgers wouldn't dare to salute a group like that.
No, it's true. And, you know, let's face it, baseball's a great game. People go to a ball game to be entertained, to have fun. Forcing this stuff down the throats of the paying patrons at ball games and those watching on TV, there's a message here. It's, we want to take over your thought process. We want you to agree that homosexuality is good, that there is such a thing as a transsexual, that mocking women by dressing up as women and calling yourself a drag queen is okay. Guess what, fellas? That's not why I'm going to the ball game. Leave this program out. I'll debate with anybody, but I don't want to do it at Dodger Stadium. This is really sad, but look, it's a cultural juggernaut, as Bob was saying earlier. The way you fight a cultural juggernaut, stand your ground and show that basically immorality and insanity have no role to play in the public life. We're going to refute it with the truth, calmly, and in charity, which are really, truth and charity are the same thing.
Gentlemen, we will leave it there. You know, Bob, before we started, said maybe we should rebrand ourselves, or at least for this period, as the posse of the peripheries, Father. And I think maybe that's what we should do going forward for a few weeks at least. The posse of the peripheries. Well, that'll be our synod banner that will march under that. Gentlemen, thank you for commentary by Robert Royal and Father Gerald Murray. Visit thecatholicthing.org. Thank you both. A Louisiana business owner and father of 5 is paying a hefty price for his expressing his Catholic faith. This follows an Instagram post where he commemorated the celebration of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. A backlash followed, as did national headlines. Joining me to discuss what has happened since is Louisiana native and business owner of Backwater Foie Gras, Ross McKnight. Ross, thanks for being here. Last weekend, you put up this Instagram post, and I'll read it to people. It said, the push to have every mainstream value and holiday represented in some way in our Louisiana ought to make no sense at all to any Louisians unless recognized as a forward offensive by an ever-encroaching enemy that has sought to, for generations, to destroy our unique culture, which is so intimately tied to our Catholic identity. The attempted coup of the month of June is part of that offensive, but I can suggest some antidotes to a false pride. And you go on to list enthroning of the Sacred Heart in your home, wearing the Sacred Heart badge, praying the rosary for the conversion of souls. Now, you own a small family business, Ross, and you've lost 2/3 of your customers since that post appeared on Instagram. Were your clients predominantly restaurants in New Orleans? What's their beef here?
Certainly. So thank you for having me. Ave Maria. I lost I would say 2/3 of our restaurant accounts, which is significant for us because that's the predominant part of our business. We do much less as far as retail goes. And, you know, I think it's just, it's a mounting frustration that they have with us, you know, because if we maintain our Catholic faith, and we do speak about that, we're not quiet about that. I think throughout the years that's been apparent with at least our farm, or at least within the last year. And, you know, seeing of course Pride Month becoming more and more prominent, I you know, had a sense of righteous anger and wanted to promote the Sacred Heart and reclaim the month, as many have said before. I know there's a Reclaim the Month movement out there, but yeah, it's for the Sacred Heart. It's always been for the Sacred Heart. I mean, we can go back to 1856, but it's really, this is something that heaven has wanted to promote for hundreds of years. And so that's our job as Louisiana Catholics.
Why do you think this post enraged activists and these businesses who had contracted with you for years? I mean, where's the diversity of thought here?
Certainly, I think it's probably just a tipping point, right? A little more pointed than things perhaps I've said before, but it is, I suppose there's irony here in that my criticism was that this culture that is from outside, right, is something that's being forced on us, and then the response was indeed to express that sort of force and rage against our business. So I think that was all that they had left, was to let us go you know? And so that's what happened.
You have very deep roots in Louisiana soil. You celebrate your French ancestry, you live out your Catholic faith, and you've said that you don't have a litmus test for your customers, and you've been open about your faith. I mean, you signed several of your posts with "For God and King" in French. Are you surprised by the reaction of customers toward you? I mean, this didn't come out of left field for them.
No, I'm. You know, it was. Yeah, I guess it was interesting that it happened now because it's not like they don't know who I am, right? You know, these are people I see very frequently. Anybody who wants to know what type of person I am can go look on our Instagram page, right? Or look on our Facebook page, or look at our farm blog. But it's yeah, so I guess it's perhaps it was just for some person who was more than others offended by our rejection of pride and our support for the Sacred Heart. I suppose it was just the tipping point, because it was in very close succession that we received those two cancellations.
And what are they telling you? What did those businesses tell you? And tell me the most surprising thing that came out of this entire controversy for you.
Certainly. The first one, you know, mentioned the word, you know, essentially because I'm a homophobe, they can't purchase my products. I always find the word homophobe very silly, because I don't think we're afraid of them, right? That's certainly not the case here. And then the other statement was a chef saying that they were, we'll just say that they were proudly, you know, identified with sexual disorder themselves, right? Which is, of course, a very interesting thing to want to share and be proud of, I think. So, and the surprising thing is that, you know, we went from a day of just utter distress, right? Thinking, how can we, what are we going to do now? And, you know, having those moments of just it felt insane to be, for instance, preparing to receive birds that were being shipped to us in the morning that the majority of which didn't have a home, right? That had to be eventually processed and go to one of these restaurants. So all of that, of course, sort of more than reversed itself almost overnight. And I've mentioned to a couple of friends, I've just been a babe in the hand of God, you know, just providence has taken care of us ever since then. And I haven't had to think about much as far as what decisions I need to make. It seems very clear. And it seems that, you know, the outpouring of God's love is, I guess, the most astounding thing.
So you've,
especially.
I mean, I know you've lost some business because of these posts and this expression of your beliefs and faith. I imagine you've gained business as well. I mean, you made national headlines. I saw you on Fox. I read about your story in papers. I mean, this has been a national story.
Yeah, I actually need to apologize because my business is so tiny. I have probably gotten a lot of calls that are extremely valuable. You know, a lot of emails are extremely valuable, but my phone is a complete and utter war zone, and I'm just one guy, essentially. You know, it's like me and my parents and my wife and children. So handling all of this is not something we're equipped for. And but I would say that there are two well-known Catholic chefs in Louisiana specifically that have reached out to us to help and to meet with us, and so that's ahead of us. And, you know, even before, you know, the news came out, friends were coming to the farm and buying product, and they wanted to help. And so that outpouring of support we are extremely grateful for. We've been very well taken care of. There's nothing we need. And I would encourage people, you know, if you want to help us, just make that devotion to the Sacred Heart. Pray the Rosary, yes, enthrone your home. Pray a novena to the Sacred Heart. Make the morning offering of St. Therese, which, of course, is a prayer to the Sacred Heart. Those are the things that we have to keep the Sacred Heart as the focus here, and keep the message pure, because this is the battle's pitched here, right? It's been given to us. The Sacred Heart and the burning love of the Sacred Heart of Jesus for all mankind has been pitched against the false claim of love, right? In pride, in our nation. And so it's very clear what standard we need to fight under.
Ross McKnight, we will leave it there. Thank you for your time. For more information on Backwater Farmstead, visit Backwater Foie Gras. That's Backwater, FOIEGRAS.com. Thank you.
God bless you.
On Friday, June 16th, Catholics will process in prayer from the Cathedral of Our Lady, Queen of the Angels in Los Angeles to Dodger Stadium in reparation for the offenses committed by the anti-Catholic drag queen nuns known as the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. The group will be honored by the Dodgers during their Pride Night. Joining me to discuss this and much more, the Most Reverend Joseph Strickland, Bishop of Tyler, Texas. He will be incidentally leading this procession of prayer to Dodger Stadium. Your Excellency, thank you for being here. The Dodgers made headlines last month when they first invited this anti-Catholic group to be honored at a Pride Night game. After protests from the Catholic League and other groups, the drag queens were disinvited, but when the LGBT community protested, the Dodgers re-invited the drag queen groups. Now, this group openly mocks the church in blasphemous ways. What was your reaction to the Dodgers when you saw this swing back to their initial invitation to honor these people?
Well, very disappointed isn't strong enough word, just really a shock that they would buckle to, sadly, the power voices of our time that are not about the truth, but about an agenda that really is evil. I think we have to call it evil, not calling persons evil, because we can all be redeemed. We're all sinful, but this event is evil, and it's certainly anti-Catholic, but I think that's sort of a badge of honor for us as Catholics, because really it's anti-Christian, and it reminds people that the Catholic Church is the beacon of Christianity, or should be, in the world. So I know it's devastating to many, and I responded when Catholics for Catholics invited me to participate in this procession, a procession of prayer. I said yes, because we need to, with clarity and charity, speak the truth, not attacking anyone, but simply standing and saying, don't attack our Lord Jesus Christ and these wonderful women that are so humble and beautiful throughout the world and in this nation. The women religious are some of our unsung heroes, and for them to be mocked along with our Lord himself, it's just, we have to speak up against it.
I was going to ask you, how did you decide to lead this Eucharistic procession, which falls on the Feast of the Sacred Heart, and why you? You're the Bishop of Tyler, Texas, not Los Angeles.
Well, really, Raymond, I don't have the answers to all of that. I just know I was invited by Catholics for Catholics to come. And I said, well, it's going to be difficult, but they said, well, we'll help you make it happen. And I said, well, if it's supposed to happen, then I'm open to it. There were some glitches with letting Archbishop Gomez know that I was coming, but finally that did happen. And, all I can speak for is the Sacred Heart devotion has been significant since I was a child for my own journey. So the fact that it's on the Feast of the Sacred Heart and what this prayer procession is about, when they asked me, my response was, sure, I'll participate. You say that I'm leading it. I'm glad to, if that's what's happening. I just said, I'll be there if I can. And I think that we need to just cut through some of the confusion and the noise and just remember who we are. I'm called to be a successor of the apostles. I'm in a small diocese in a corner of Texas, but I was invited and I said, well, if we can make it happen, I'm glad to join in this prayerful procession. It's not a protest, but it's simply praying in reparation and praying for all those who are caught up in this false messaging that is just overwhelming the world and sadly, even very significantly overwhelming the church.
There have been several bishops who have been outspoken about the Dodgers' decision here. Bishop Robert Barron, Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone, who was on our show last week, Bishop Donald Hying, and others. Will there be other Catholic bishops joining in this procession of prayer, or do you know, Bishop?
I don't know. I hope so. It isn't an easy day for bishops to be there because the bishops' meeting is on the other coast in Orlando. But they managed to make it possible for me to be there. I hope that other bishops will join us because the people need their shepherds leading them. And, you know, I'm one bishop, but I believe that I need to be there, and I'm glad to be there. I know many people are praying that the event will have the positive effect that I know the organizers wanted to have in reparation for the blasphemies and just to change hearts back to Christ on the feast of his Sacred Heart.
Yeah. Bishop, you know, the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, I mean, having lived in New York City and Washington, D.C., and New York, you know, you see this group over many years. I've seen them. I mean, they engage in all sorts of kind of blasphemous dances. They do mock nuns and religious figures, Jesus and Mary. I mean, I can't even show viewers video of this group because, I mean, it you know, it only extends the blasphemy. My question to you is if other groups engaged in this kind of mockery of religion and key religious figures like Muhammad or Moses, do you think we'd be seeing the Dodgers re-inviting them for an honor like this or tributing them in any way?
I don't think so. I think certainly, as I mentioned already, I'm glad that this is totally without violence or attack of anyone. It's a prayerful procession. That's how we need to operate as disciples of Jesus Christ. We oppose what's false, but we do so with love and charity and calling hearts back to the truth. But as you allude to, Raymond, I think other religious groups might not react with the passivity that we are. We're sometimes too passive as Christians, but I think this is the right balance of acting, but acting in love and in prayerful humility. But other groups might well, and frankly, in the world we live in, violence speaks. And I think other groups are probably hands off because there's a history of sometimes violent reactions to some of the blasphemies toward other religious leaders. We know that Jesus Christ is Lord of all. And so I think we need to seek his model as we react as he did. He was mocked in his own incarnate life here. He was spat upon. He was beaten to the end of his life. And then, of course, he died on the cross. We have to take him as the quiet model that stands for the truth, doesn't back down, but always does so with great humility, especially in this month of June. We need that humility of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Any idea how many people will be participating in this prayerful procession? And what are you hoping will be the result of this as you all march toward Dodger Stadium next Friday?
I have no idea really how many will participate. Hopefully, many people will take the time to be there to honor the Feast of the Sacred Heart of Jesus Christ and also to pray in reparation. And really the result I would hope for is as many hearts as possible. I know there are committed Catholic, faithful Catholic people who are disheartened and weakened by all that we're seeing in the world and all the confusion and all the ambiguity. I hope their hearts are strengthened. And I hope and pray that hearts are converted, that maybe people there, maybe even some of these participating directly in this sacrilegious presentation, maybe through prayerful action and through loving reparation, God can change all of our hearts, and all of our hearts need to grow closer to the Lord and his truth. we're all in need of ongoing conversion. And I think we always have to humbly approach something like this in that way. But my hope would be for hearts that are with Christ to be deepened in him, to be stronger in his love, and for those that have wandered into darkness and sin, that they will be converted or reconverted to the light that Christ brings. He's the light of the world.
Yeah. Bishop, I am startled, not that this group is being honored, but that they're being honored by the Dodgers, a group that, you know, I knew Tommy Lasorda. He was a family friend, the longtime manager of the Dodgers, who was a fervent Catholic, would never have put up with this. Vince Scully, of course, who was associated with the Dodgers for, you know, most of his life. Again, a very faithful Catholic man. It is amazing to me that the organization has gone out of its way to salute a group that mocks and ridicules the deeply held faith of the men who helped build this organization. I'll give you the last word.
Well, Raymond, I think what you allude to is, sadly, we're seeing it in every aspect of society. Corporations that were founded on good American values and hard work and providing quality products and all. I mean, it seems the whole society is caught up in this, and it truly is evil. I think we have to call it evil. Once again, calling out these things as evil doesn't label any individual as evil, and God loves all of us. God loves every person that will be on any side of what happens at Dodger Stadium, those in the procession and those who may be blaspheming him. That's the wonder of our merciful God. He allows us. I mean, there are consequences that will come if we continue to blaspheme, but he gives us that freedom. Always his hope and the life of his son is directed toward bringing us to his truth and to his life and grace. And he gives us chance after chance to do so. So I think we have to let ourselves rejoice in the God that we know, in his mercy and compassion, and that we honor him and his son by doing all we can to stand for the truth.
Bishop, we will leave it there. The prayerful procession to Dodger Stadium with Bishop Joseph Strickland of Tyler will take place Friday, June 16th in Los Angeles, starting at the Cathedral of Our Lady of the Angels. That is all the time we have for now. Be sure to catch us next week. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thank you for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo. I know.